Hey, if you're a Bitcoiner and a small business owner, and you've been watching the Michael Saylor and MicroStrategy playbook of putting Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and you're wondering how you can do the same thing as a small business owner, and you'd like to play around with some different financial modeling and projections to see what that might look like for your small business, then you've come to the right place, because we have built a financial projection spreadsheet template that is built specifically for this use case for small businesses that might want to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet and really see what that might look like based on a bear case, a base case, and a bull case, Bitcoin price, and also playing with parameters about what percentage of your free cash flows might you be putting into Bitcoin, what percentage of equity or debt that you might issue, what would you put into Bitcoin purchases. So I'm going to walk you through the template here step by step. There's quite a bit here, so I'm going to walk you through really step by step how to fill the whole model out and show you what the different outputs are. Before I dive into the details of the template, just a little bit of background on me. My name is Adam Huxama. I am the co-founder of ProjectionHub, and we help small businesses create financial projections. Historically, that's been for SBA loans or raising capital from investors. But Dante Cook, who you may have known if you're a Bitcoiner, and on YouTube you may have seen some of his videos on YouTube, reached out and wanted to collaborate on a financial model specifically for modeling small businesses that might want to buy Bitcoin and put it on their balance sheet. So we worked together, built this template, and so I'm going to walk you through that now. We'll put a link in the description of the video below to be able to grab the template and do this yourself. So I'm going to show you kind of the green at a glance tabs. This is just kind of the end of the process. So once you have filled out all of your assumptions, you are going to get a full 5-year financial model. So it's going to come with this at a glance tab with a number of just general small business like stats, your profit and loss at a glance, EBITDA, some key ratios for the business. It also has some specific Bitcoin related details here. It has some graphs and charts, some Bitcoin value to total liability and equity, some different charts and graphs that would be useful there. It's also going to have a 5-year income statement summary, a 5-year cash flow summary, a 5-year balance sheet summary, again with Bitcoin on the balance sheet at the fair market value under the new FASB regulations that would be coming out in 2025, and then an income statement, cash flow statement, and balance sheet all broken down by month for each of the 5 years. So that's kind of the output of the financial model. There is a couple of Bitcoin specific tabs that I'm going to start with here and kind of show you how you can set different assumptions. And then I'll dive into the details of how to make assumptions for the small business, the operating company itself. So of course, the Bitcoin assumption tabs are both orange, and we can come up here and select a bear case, base case, or bull case, and we can set different parameters, right? So we're saying, what do we think the annual rate of return is going to be in 2025 here, based on the bear case, base case, and bull case. And then we have this idea of an ARR, or annual rate of return reduction each year. So this is just saying, hey, it's going to go down. The rate of return is going to go down by whatever percentage you put in here. So down by 5% per year until you reach a steady state ARR. So for example, if I'm to select the bear case here, what you'll notice down here is that we start at 25%, we go down 5%, and then the next year we go down to that steady state, to the 18%. So if you want to set, it's not going to get lower than this annual rate of return, that's what you can set in the steady state. And then of course you can select your different, base case, bull case, or bear case. You'll also be able to set the projected Bitcoin share price or Bitcoin price manually here. So if you wanted to, for the first year, for example, maybe you just put in a manual number. If you wanted to, you can overwrite the equation here. And then after that, it's going to start applying the assumptions of the case that you use. So the base, bear, or bull case, and it will, calculate what the projected Bitcoin price would be based on those assumptions for each month. And this is important because now we're going to come to our next tab here and have some additional assumptions. We need an estimated effective tax rate on the capital gains. So the model is going to assume that you will sell Bitcoin if the business needs cash. So if you have Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and then let's say you have a slow year, or you have some investments and you in the business and you needed cash, it will sell Bitcoin. And when it sells that Bitcoin, it may create a capital gain depending on what the price of Bitcoin is in that month when it's a sale is triggered. And so this effective tax rate is an assumption here that we need to know how much to tax that gain, that proposed or that projected gain on the sale. We also give you the ability to say, let's say you already have some Bitcoin on the balance sheet and you want to put in a cost basis and a number of Bitcoin that you have on the balance sheet already. So you can set that assumption here. And then you're going to be able to put in what percentage of your opening cash are you going to convert to BTC. So let's say, again, you're taking the MicroStrategy playbook and you've got a chunk of cash sitting on the balance sheet and you're going to do a one-time buy with, let's say, 50% of your cash, you're going to immediately convert to Bitcoin. And then you can set here a percentage of operating cash converted to Bitcoin each year. So this is effectively, what amount of your free cash flow are you going to be converting to Bitcoin? And so we'll be able to see the cash from operations after your debt service, and then it will automatically make purchases based on those assumptions. You can also issue debt or get, loans. As a small business, it's probably not really considered issuing debt. You're not issuing convertible bonds probably, but you might get a business loan. And so if you're able to get a business loan and maybe you are converting some percentage of that to Bitcoin as well. This may be a little less likely for a small business. You're probably not going to be able to go to your local bank and ask for an SBA loan and say that you want to put half of it straight into Bitcoin. I'm guessing that probably won't fly, but we want to have the ability to model this in here as well to kind of follow that MicroStrategy playbook. Let's say you want to sell a portion of the company, so you're selling shares of the business or selling a percentage of the company, raising cash, and then you can put a percentage of that new equity issuance into Bitcoin as well. So we have assumptions for that. And then we have this idea here. So we're calling it the risk-free Bitcoin stack builder. So this is something that River offers that we heard about on a podcast and thought was interesting. So River offers an FDIC insured cash account. So you could put some cash reserves or just, your working capital into checking account with River, and they will pay interest on that. And I think probably 3.5%, but you can change whatever the interest rate is. They'll pay that 3.5%, but they'll pay it out in Bitcoin. And so you'll kind of automatically be stacking. And so I think that was interesting to be able to set an assumption here of what percentage of our cash reserves are going to be held in that River account is the idea. There could be other services that will start offering this as well. As far as I know, River's the only one that's doing that right now. So here's some summary information. Based on the data we've got in the model, you'll be able to see how much Bitcoin is purchased, the cash paid, average cost per Bitcoin purchased, Bitcoin share price at year end or Bitcoin price at the year end. And then this will also model liquidated Bitcoin. So if you needed to liquidate. So let me just give you an example of making a change here in the model that would show what that liquidation might look like. So let's say in 2026, I'm just going to come over here and add a big expense. So let's just add $1 million expense. I'm going to come back here. And so what we'll see here is Bitcoin liquidated, 2.83 Bitcoin liquidated, and we generated 494,000 in cash because we needed to cover that $1 million expense. So you can see kind of how the model would work. And when you do that, when you liquidate, you're also going to have a gain or loss as well as tax consequences of that as well. Okay, so I'm going to come back and kind of undo that change that I made. And then here's your kind of your summary just for River, the basically the cash that you're holding, the working capital cash that you're holding in the River account, but also allows you to see, what kind of Bitcoin you're able to purchase through that checking account where you're earning interest. Okay, so that's kind of the Bitcoin side of this. I guess there's maybe one more tab that could be useful from a Bitcoin perspective, and then we'll dive into a little bit more of the just general operating business side of the model. We do have a section here about valuation. There's lots of different ways to value a small business. You have kind of a book value, a discounted cash flow value method, a multiple of earnings method, and then we put in this kind of net Bitcoin value or a multiple of net Bitcoin value. This is kind of like the MNAV multiple of net asset value for MicroStrategy that we see. We see that MicroStrategy is being valued at a multiple of the Bitcoin that they're holding on their balance sheet. So what this allows you to do in this little section is say, we want to assume what if our MNAV, or our multiple of the Bitcoin net value that we have on the balance sheet is valued at 2.5 times. What would that look like based on the Bitcoin that we have on the balance sheet at that time? And so it's looking at, the way this is being calculated, it's looking at the Bitcoin value after 5 years in the model, and then applying the multiple to give you that enterprise value just with the Bitcoin portion, right? So the operating business probably has its own valuation based on, maybe a multiple of earnings, and you could have different multiples based on the industry that you're in. There is a video here that kind of goes into detail about how the rest of the kind of non-Bitcoin related business valuation tab works here. So I won't repeat all of that. If you're interested in that, you can check that video out. Okay, let's look at the blue tabs here. So this is really how we're going to enter in assumptions about the operating business, which is, necessary to be able to fill this whole model out. So we can set a projection start month here. We can set a current cash balance, or total paid in capital, or what's been invested into the business historically. Some opening balance sheet items. So how much do you have in accounts receivable? How many days does it take you to get paid when you make a sale? What's your inventory balance? How much inventory do you hold on the balance sheet as a percentage of sales? Your opening accounts payable balance, and the average days payables outstanding. So how long does it take you to pay your bills? You can put in your existing fixed assets here by asset type, remaining life expectancy, and that will calculate depreciation. You can add new equipment. So let's say we're going to add some new equipment, $50,000 of new equipment in a future month. You might have current loans. So let's say you have a current SBA loan of $150,000 balance at 8% interest over a 10-year term. Then maybe you're going to get a new loan here of $200,000 in a future month, and you can set that up as well. You can also add in additional investment, so equity investment here. We are also able to enter in your historical financial data. So you can set the number of months of data. So if it's mid-year in the year, like if you're starting this in April of 2025, for example, and you've already got 4 months of data in 2025, you can enter in the number of months you have for the current year. And then you can select from this dropdown, how do you want your kind of baseline of projections what do you want it to be based on? So we can say we want to annualize the current year. We can take an average of all the available years that we have data for. We can look at the prior fiscal year, or the prior year and current year average. So we're just going to assume here we're going to annualize the current year. Let's say we've got 4 months of data. Let's assume we just stay on that same pace and annualize that out. And that becomes our baseline for both revenue and expenses. And then we're projecting from there. So we might say, okay, here's our baseline, and we think revenue is going to grow 5% a year off of that baseline, or expenses are going to grow 3% a year off of the baseline. And so that's why this is an important assumption. We want to know what to have as our baseline for projections. So you can enter in your historical financials. You don't have to enter in like every year. It's really, it may not be necessary if the purpose is really just for modeling out Bitcoin purchases. You probably just need at least some historical data in order to set a baseline for your projections. Okay, so once we've entered in the historical data, we can enter in different revenue projections. And so on the revenue side, you can set different revenue categories. So let's say let's just consider this like products. Revenue category 1 is products. Revenue category 2 could be services. Within the products, maybe you have 2 different products, but they're both a product. So you're going to select the revenue category 1 as the product category, right? And maybe you've got 3 services and you've got them categorized as revenue category 2. So for example, like you can change this. We change this to say product and service, products and services. Then we would come down here and we need to update our categories here to products and services. Okay, from there, this is where you're going to get that baseline. So this is annualizing the current year revenue. This gray column here is your baseline. And this is where we annualized, because we selected from here, we annualized the current year. So for each revenue line item, it is annualizing the current year to create a baseline. And then you get to set your projection methods going forward. So you can say, I want to either apply an annual growth rate, or I can do manual entry. If I do manual entry, I could just put in a specific dollar amount of sales that I think I'm going to do each year. So 25, 50, 75,000, right? Or you can apply these, percentage growth rates. This is pretty straightforward on the revenue side. That will then, you'll get to see the changes to the revenue. Like if I bump this up to, 15%, we can see the adjustment here in the increase in revenue here. Okay, so let's look at the expense side of things now. So we can kind of go through the same process where we set different cost of goods sold categories, operating expense categories, and then we can select the category for each line item, and we can enter in a different entry method or projection method. So there's actually 3 options here. You can have an annual growth rate. So it just assumes, maybe this expense is going to be whatever the inflation rate is, 3% a year, 5% a year, depends on how much money printing we see, I guess. And then we can do just a growth rate, or we can set a percentage of revenue. So this expense, this cost of goods sold expense, we can say this should be a percentage of revenue, and we need to select here what category of revenue. So this line item is going to be a percentage of product revenue. This line item we're going to say is a percentage of services revenue. And then what this column will do is it will calculate and say, okay, historically, based on your historical financials, this line item has been 22% of product revenue, and it's been 7% of services revenue. And maybe this line item, direct labor, has been 7% of total revenue. And so we can say going forward, we want these expenses to keep that same percentage of revenue going forward. So instead of just applying an annual growth rate, these expenses will automatically scale as a percentage of revenue. So as your revenue scales, so does your cost of goods sold, for example. And then lastly, we can enter in, a manual entry expense where we could just put in a dollar amount for a particular line item or expense. Okay, so that is really it. Based on those revenue and expense assumptions that you put in, that's going to be what drives your, projected cash flow. So your cash from operating activities, and then ultimately, what you're going to be able to purchase with your free cash flow and convert to Bitcoin. So yeah, there's a lot here. Obviously, I went through this relatively quick, even though I'm 20 minutes in, but if you have questions about this, and if you want us to help fill it out for you based on your historical data, or look at new scenarios with you, that is something we're happy to do. We do have some services where we can fill out a projection model for you. Again, I think this is probably not something that you're needing. This is probably more of a toy to play with, right, as a Bitcoiner, than something that you're like presenting to your SBA lender, since that's unlikely that you're going to be able to get an SBA loan to purchase Bitcoin. But we'll see, things can change. So I think with that, I'm going to just leave it to reach out to us at support@projectionhub.com if you have any questions, or if you'd like help kind of implementing this kind of strategy. I know Dante Cook would love to help, and so you can reach out to us again at support@projectionhub.com. We can get you in touch with Dante as well to help you get a setup for your business. So yeah, we'd love your feedback in the comments of the video, or reaching out to us to let us know how we can improve upon this. But we hope this has been fun and helpful. All right, thanks.